Good morning, and welcome to another exciting edition of Day 4 with the man, Frank Scalish.
Big things,
What's
Matt.
up, Frank?
Big things coming up, buddy. Big things coming up.
Recorded show December 12th, 2024. At the airing of this show, guess where I am, like right now. Hopefully, God willing, all things go smoothly.
Jerking on an 8-pounder on a super spook.
Oh, I hope so.
You're so lucky, dude.
I hope so. Lake El Salto Pro Bass Adventures headed down there for the week, so kind of an annual deal that will grow and have more opportunities to get BTL listeners involved with that in the coming months and years, hopefully. But I talked to you, sometimes after the end of the show, Frank, we blow V8, we sit around after and just chat, what we liked about the show, what we didn't. And I said, dude, I'm going down to El Salto, and the goal is obviously 10-pounder, right?
Oh yeah, double digit all the way.
But yeah, I was telling you last time I was there, there were schools of 4 and 5-pounders or 3, 2.5s that you could just catch till you were blue in the face. But it seemed, I think we caught 6 over 8 and a 9.7 last year.
Oh my God.
But it seemed like when we caught those bigger fish, they were in like kind of different areas. We were doing different stuff, that type of thing. Like we weren't pounding 3.5s and then a 10 shows up.
No, that's never how it goes. I mean, go ahead.
Well, no, as I said, can we record a show for my own personal gain then too, and also for the listeners? Like, have you talked about kind of, let's say you just want to go out and you want to get a couple bites and one might be the fish of a lifetime. Is there stuff you can do?
Yeah, no, we really hadn't done a show like that specifically, because I went through this morning. I went through every show we've done.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I didn't watch every show we did, but
that'd have been like 200 hours of live footage.
Right? That's right. I'd be in a wheelchair right now. But yeah, so I went through, and because I wanted to make sure that if we did, now the one show we touched on making a move if you're catching a lot of small fish.
Right.
We touched on that. We kind of were talking about patterns and stuff like that. So no, the quick answer would have been no. We did not.
But there is a way to put yourself in a better position based 100%. On the season, based on locations, based on your mentality and your attack of the day, regardless of whether you're on a lake where a giant's a 4-pounder or whether you're in a lake where a giant's a 12-pounder, to put yourself in a better chance of success. And that's what you're going to take a deep dive into today.
Yeah, we're going to cover it. It's a tricky animal because it does depend on season. What you're going to do is going to be dependent on the season. Your approach essentially will be the same no matter what season it is, but where you're at in the lake will be different. We're going to get in. We're going to talk some generalities and some specifics. So some parts of it will be generalities because every lake makeup is different, and then there'll be some specific things that you're going to need to focus on.
Yes. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be fun. One thing before we get started, because
something dropped on the 9th, which would have been 3 days ago, because when we did our live show with Sergeant McCloskey, great guest last week.
Shout out to him. He did a really good job on the show.
Yeah, something was dropping on the 9th, and then something was dropping on the 12th.
Correct. So Monday the 9th, the Pro Rogues,
3 days, which was 3 days before
earlier.
This show. Yeah,
correct.
We're in time warp right now, Frank.
That's okay. The Pro Rogue dropped in all the FX colors. Today is the Signature Series drop, and it will be St. Clair Red.
Oh, that's the first time I've seen that.
Yeah, this bait. So there's a crayfish in Lake St. Clair. They call it the St. Clair crayfish up here. They're more than in St. Clair, but they got the name because they're very popular crayfish species in Lake St. Clair. I did 3 color variants on it. I did the St. Clair Red, which drops today.
Yep.
I did St. Clair orange, which is their natural color year round, except for when they molt. And then I did St. Clair chartreuse, which is more of their color when they molt. Now it's called St. Clair chartreuse because there's hints of chartreuse in it. But really it's that semi-translucent greenish when they become soft-shelled crayfish. Because the crayfish, when a crayfish molts for a period of time, it's a soft-shelled animal. It's like it feels almost like a sponge. Bass seek them out. I mean, this is like they seek them out. When I was a young kid, we used to smallmouth fish on Lake Erie with my grandfather, and we would go get soft-shelled crayfish, and you couldn't keep smallmouth off of them. Largemouth, same thing. You can't keep them off of a soft shell. So I did the 3-color variants. The first one is going to the released is going to be St. Clair red. Clearly, this is the colder water color. Everybody knows that you throw the reds, the red variants in the springtime, but you can also catch them in the fall and early winter on red as well. For some reason, it's that water temperature deal. So they work just as good in the fall as they do in the early spring before they come up to pre-spawn. And so yeah, and
Look at that. Well, I was looking at that color and I'm looking at this and I was like, well, that paint scheme is a little. There's some odd like orangey red patches in it, and then I look at this crayfish here and it's got the exact like it's got like those splotches.
Yeah.
I've never seen that before.
Yeah, and it's real random. No crayfish thing. Not
Yeah.
one of these animals is the same. The orange is all over them. Like I'm fortunate enough to have caught bass that regurgitate them in the boat, and some of the orange blotches will be on the forehead, some will be on the abdomen, some will be on the tail. It's real random. So basically it's a color representation. As long as it looks marbled and mottled like that animal, it's effective because no two. Look at that. See what I mean? You see how it's got them on the back side of the carapace where the tail is, and then you have a few blotches on top of the tail, and then you've got some random orange on the head and the meat part of the abdomen. But no two are the same, and so that's what prompted me to paint these. Now I have the other two painted. Clearly, I could show them to you, but this is St. Clair Red's the one that's releasing today. But so that's why I designed this. Now, there's a fortunate and an unfortunate thing to this. The unfortunate thing is it's in the signature series. So it's once it's done, it's done.
Yeah.
Originally, I painted these to go into a limited run so we could make a lot of them. And they liked them so much they wanted them in the signature series. I'm going to somehow try to. I want this bait in the line. I want these colors in the line because they're banging. I mean, these are banging colors. So if you're planning fishing them, buy a ton of them.
And what plug is that painted on, Frank?
Norman Deep Little N. Which here's the good thing about the Norman Deep Little N. You can fish this bait in 4 to 12 feet of water. So you have to understand in the springtime when you're focusing on those 45-degree banks, okay, you can throw it up there, slow roll it through the rocks. It'll root through the rocks perfectly. And then you can also fish it in that 10 to 14 foot range where it's bouncing and bumping bottom in 10 to 12 and then starts to break free in that 14-foot zone. Because the bait truly won't get to the 14-foot mark where it's dredging because traditionally the way you're fishing it in the spring, you're not bombing a mile-long cast like if you're fishing a offshore hump where you have the line capacity to get the bait down. So you're more target fishing in the spring or close quarters, let's call it. You're closer to what you want to fish. So that's the beauty part about the Deep Little N. That's why I wanted it in that bait.
And Last month we literally did a show on matching your line size to your lure, so you can go
Correct.
back to 184, and then we did one last year as well, where you specifically talked about using anywhere from but you did line diameters, not pound tests, but anywhere from
Right.
8 to 16 pound tests to
Yeah.
determine how deep it is, whether you're grinding it, whether you're throwing it off deep, or whether it's open water. So good
Correct.
stuff. Every single one of them sold out. So
Yeah.
they're now and they've made their way to eBay.
Which is where I'm going to have to clearly get some to fish or paint my own.
Well,
I
it's kind of handy that you're at the Scalish Palace now, so you go 6 floors down to the man
6
cave.
floors. I go down, I take the elevator to the man cave.
It's
to the bat cave.
4 floors from your studio, right?
Correct.
1, 2, yeah, 4.
Yeah.
So you pull up to Scalish's house. It's like this cathedral just keeps going and going and going.
Sure it does. it's stairway
Which
to
is
heaven.
all fun and games until you get a bad bathroom on the 4th floor.
Yeah, no kidding. Which is please. Do we got to go back there?
No.
I
thought we had that all dialed.
I
thought we had that all dialed in.
We do. I just have one more sanding coat on the ceiling and then paint, and then we're
fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. So there you go. Lurenet.com, the FX colors, and the St. Clair red in the deep little N. Don't forget, on anything that is regularly priced capital BTL24, the loyal listener code to get 15% off your regularly priced items. And let them know that Uncle Frank sent you, which keeps him, in a job to be able to do all those home renovations.
Yeah, correct. But yeah, so I mean, full disclosure, I did paint some of these colors for me as well, so I do have some.
Very nice. All right, help me and the listeners catch bigger bass. Let's start right now. And obviously, we can't do ice fishing up north because everything's socked in up there. But that whole southern part of the United States is getting cold. Guys are able to get on the water. Fish are grouping up.
Yeah.
Am I painting a decent picture right now?
Oh yeah.
Let's dive into, if you want to put your biggest bass in the boat of the year before the year ends, or maybe start the year off. What are you doing?
Okay, so first we're going to cover some common knowledge, maybe a myth or two, and then we're going to get into exactly how we're going to do this.
Okay.
The big thing is that I'm going to make a lot of people crazy right now, but
oh boy,
big lures do not always mean big bass. So you have to keep that into your head, because there are going to be times when you're going to need to go finesse. So big lures don't always mean big bass. But that being said, okay, there are traditional lures that always seem to catch a better quality fish. And this is not going to be about lures, so I'm just going to blow through this. Probably the top 2 lures that come to mind that consistently catch better quality is clearly a jig and a buzzbait. Now we're not going to get in deep. We're not going in the weeds. Another lure is a deep diving crankbait, a big body deep diving crankbait. Mm-hmm. And of course, punching. Punching always seems to lead you to a better quality fish in lakes that you can punch. Some non-traditional baits that became traditional baits are big glide baits and big swim baits. Back in the day, those were almost not even in existence. But today, with the advent of some of our technology and giving us more knowledge of how these big fish behave, glide baits and big swim baits are pretty much a main player in catching gigantic fish. So that's as far on the lures as I'm going to get, because some of the biggest bass I've ever caught in my life have literally come on a 2-inch bait. So we're just going to skim on the lures. So how do we find these big fish? So here's the biggest thing that this year, this is crazy. We're doing this now, Matt.
Crazy.
It is. It's crazy because this year I focused solely on targeting big fish where I live.
Okay.
Now, where I live, a big fish is, 4 to 6 pounds. 6 pounds being a giant. Now, that's not saying
Pure northern
yes,
largemouth. We're talking
northern
largemouth.
largemouth, right? Not smallmouth,
Yep.
northern largemouth. Now, a 6 pound largemouth here is a really big fish. Not saying that I haven't come in contact with some mid range sevens, but for the most part, I'm catching 4 to 6 pounders. Um, and that's pretty much, with consistency. So, here's in my quest, okay, because I'm like a nut job. I focus on every detail because I want to be able to duplicate this on many different bodies of water. So the first thing I noticed is everything is pertaining to structure, not necessarily cover. So I've talked about this
That's
before.
a whole nother BTL show. Structure versus cover.
Correct. So structure is what the bottom does, cover is what's on the bottom. Simple. A brush pile is cover. Okay. A point, a ledge, a channel bend is structure. So that being said, everything I do is predicated on structure. There's no randomness to this. Back in the old days, and I'm not even old days, but remember when the quest for big bass in California was out of control,
Yep.
and everybody was trying to catch a world record bass. The this I forget the guy's name.
Bob Croupy.
Croupy, that's the guy's name. Good
Yeah.
job, Matt.
Here, let's tie it into the beginning. He loved fishing live crawfish.
Correct. So here's what he discovered. He would drag these live crayfish off the ends of extremely long tapering points. Okay. Again, it's a structural element. So he found that he could contact a bigger quality bass by fishing structure. Okay. So I'm going to give you an example of what happened to me 3 weeks ago. Maybe, yeah, right the end of November. It was right before Thanksgiving. So I'm out on a lake, and traditionally, normally, oh dude, man alive.
He
You know,
recently just passed away at the end of 2023.
oh, that's too bad. I
Yeah.
remember
Legend. I
that.
grew up growing up, I just, when you're a kid, like you would read and stuff in here, and this guy was
He was slaying
mythical,
it.
like
Yeah.
Sasquatch status to me. Like
Yeah.
and I had no clue. I mean, I didn't have any concept of anything, but
Dude,
that's how I knew Bob Croupy right off the top of my head.
dude, he was slaying it back then.
Oh yeah, he was the man.
He was so far ahead of his time.
And from everything I've seen and heard and remember, like so legit, like no shadiness around that at all.
No, they couldn't find anything. The guy was straight up. He was
Yep.
absolutely straight up.
I've
So,
heard some wild stories. Like he would fish for like
dude,
12, 15 days in a row, 20
yes,
hours a day if he thought
yes.
it was a window just for the chance to catch one. And he was putting these things down there on ultralight line, which nobody was doing. And he was literally like targeting, like an individual bass that lived on that structure, like just crazy stuff. Anyway.
Yeah, because one time he caught the fish in the fall, and he wanted to catch it in the spring when she was bigger. And I think somebody else caught her in the spring, and he was pissed about it. There was some controversy around that. But anyhow, so 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 what happened to me was traditionally, and here's the rule breaker, okay, because nothing it's predicated day by day. um Traditionally, I can go to this body of water and deep crank, 14, 15 feet and catch them.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, this was not in November. This was in the end of summer. My November trip was a rigging. This was the end of summer. So traditionally I can catch them cranking 14, 12 to 14, 12 to 15 feet and catch big ones. You don't catch 100 of them, but you catch enough of them where at the end of the day, you got a giant limit. So I went out there and did this, and all I could muster up was 1.5 to 2.5 pounders, occasionally a 3. Now, under most circumstances, that would keep a guy busy and he'd be happy. But when I ran 3 of these places and I couldn't catch a fish over 3 pounds, I knew I was not dialing it up.
Mm-hmm.
The patterns that I was fishing was not giving me a bigger bass. So I had to reevaluate. So I took a step back and I thought about it for a minute, and I said, well, the only thing I didn't do was go up shallow on the big grass flats. That's the only thing I didn't do. So I had to go do that. Well, I went up on the first grass flat I went to. I started, pitching around, and I believe I was throwing a Yum Money Craw, and I was pitching it around, and then boom, I got one, and it was a 5+, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, I figured it out. You know what I mean? But I went about 70 yards and never got another bite, and so I'm like, I didn't figure it out. So I went back to where I caught that fish, the exact location, because I dropped an icon on it the minute I hooked it. I went back to that same location and I realized the vegetation was different where I caught it.
Which
So
is cover.
which is cover. So I
Okay.
said, okay, they want this bright green crap. I got to find the bright green crap in all the olive green stuff. And so I just got on the trolling motor and started zigzagging over these giant flats. And every time I saw a bright green patch, I pitch in there and I'd catch a 4 to 6 pounder every single time. And it was unbelievable. It was so dialed in and so specific. And that's part of the key to catching really big bass is you have to understand the specifics of what those big fish are doing on that body of water at that time. Okay. Now, Matt, you had a real similar incident in the last tournament you fished where you could go shake a minnow on them and you were catching a certain size class of fish.
Mm-hmm.
But you knew if you picked up the jig and went to the deeper docks or the flat docks, you could catch a big one.
Mm-hmm.
That right then and there gives you the ammo you need to say, okay, on that particular lake, on that particular day, I'm going to forego catching 50 fish to try to catch 10
Mm-hmm.
or 7, but they're going to be, all big ones. This is part of the hunt for big fish. Okay. The thing that's changed in my world was forward facing
Mm-hmm.
because now we realize that there's gigantic bass at certain times of the year that are out in the middle of nowhere and they're roaming shad. They're chasing shad all year. This is another really good technique for big bass. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Predicated solely and totally on the new technology. The biggest thing that I look for, like I said, is structural elements because the big bass use structure like we use roads.
Yep.
They use them to travel on. We're going to forget about the pelagic runners. We're going to talk about what could put the
Put you in
best
the highest percentage chance to be around the structure that is holding the
correct.
fish of the lifetime.
Correct. Yeah. So let's assume that we're talking about, well, let's go early spring.
Okay.
We'll go early spring. These fish are not going to be far away from where they want to spawn, even though the water's cold, even though it's not pre-spawn and it's not the spawning season. Those fish are going to be so close to where they want to spawn that in the spring, the first thing I'm going to start doing is looking for my structural elements, drink drunk wood, my structural elements near spawning areas
Mm-hmm.
because that's where the fish are going. So remember, if you're fishing behind them, you'll never find them. You got to be either on them or in front of them so you come in contact with them. And so that's what I'm going to focus on. Now, some of the things that I like to concentrate on, as you know from structure fishing shows, channel bends, secondary creek arm splits, where a secondary creek runs into the main creek and you have that defined split.
Yep.
And here, it doesn't have to be 20 feet deep. It could be shallow. I mean, it could literally be, 4 to 12 feet deep, just as easily as it could be 12 to 20. It's just time of year is where you're going to be backing out on this or moving forward on it.
Mm-hmm.
So springtime, traditionally, you're going to be near the spawning flats. After the spawn, you're going to be, well, clearly during the spawn, you know how to catch big ones. You go look for them. You see them, you go look for them.
Which we've done another show on where
Yeah.
to look for the best, most likely
Right.
places to find spawning fish. So, like I said, we're really kind of tying together elements of about 10 different shows today.
Correct. And so post spawn's the trickiest part.
I'm looking at a map here, by the way. I've got this app with a map on it. So, like, I pulled Grand Lake up. So, as you're talking, I promise you, I'm not on Instagram. I'm scrolling. I'm scrolling through this 3D map here as you talk about it to like find the stuff you're talking about.
That's so phenomenal. So post spawn's tricky because there's a lot of stuff going on. You're still going to have fish extremely shallow. You're going to still have late spawners. You're going to have big females that spawn first that are already moving their way out to summertime structure. Okay. So you're going to work opposite. You're going to take and you're going to go where the fish were spawning and you're going to start fishing your way out from there until you come into a range where you're contacting these fish. Okay. So what happens is, and people underestimate this a lot. So shallow gravel bars are astronomical in the post spawn. They could be anywhere from 4 to 12. They're shallow. They're
Does that include shell?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay, so shell, gravel. So I'm thinking 100%. TVA fisheries, Pickwick, Kentucky Lake, Eufaula in Alabama,
yes.
Florida.
Florida, especially Florida. So on these shell bars, gravel bars, hard bottom basically, the big females will spawn and they'll go out there and they'll recoup for a time and then they'll start to gorge themselves while they're moving their way back out to the summertime structure. Carolina rigs, astronomical that time of year. You're fishing them traditionally shallow or I think the one tournament in Texas, if I'm not mistaken, Ben Milliken was Carolina rigging shallow gravel bars and catching them on shallow.
Let me interrupt you here. Is that effective that time of year because they want to consume the most number of calories with the lowest output of energy as far as recouping? So the hard bottom, it's not necessarily that they're there because the bottom is hard. It's there because the water flow over those areas are creating the hard bottom. And that flow, whether it's a TVA fishery that has a noticeable flow or a small flow like on a Toledo Bend or something, is keeping the silt, the debris, all that. So it's making the hard bottom, the gravel bottom, which then the shells are there because they have to have water movement because they're filter feeders, which that flow then brings the crayfish nutrients, which then brings the bait fish in, which then positions the fish because they're looking to recoup, and it's the highest density of high caloric intake with the least amount of energy.
Right, in a confined location.
That's at least the way I understand it, and I am not good at shell.
Well, but you're spot on. You're 100% accurate, 1,000% spot on.
Because you're like, oh well, why would they go to hard bottom? It's not because they like to scratch their bellies on the shells. It's not because they feel more comfortable. It's not because it's more it's the way I see it in my mind from all the shows that we've done and my limit, travels around for that seems to be why.
It's a feeding zone.
Yeah.
It's a feeding zone. Yeah. So because a lot of people say, oh, it's post spawn, bats don't eat. they're too
Yeah,
tired.
that's the
No,
one thing that forward-facing sonar has shown is that the bass are always eating
they're
12
always
months
eating.
out of the year.
That
They're
bass,
just harder to target with traditional
well, because
baits at
they're a little
times.
bit
Yeah.
more spread out. They're doing a lot of different things.
Or they're grouped up on a shell bed, and if you're not on that, they're not actively swimming around because they're all
Correct.
in an area that, spread out recouping.
Correct. That's where pinpoint accuracy
Yeah.
casting is important.
Or
Structure.
good map study and
Right.
side imaging and 2D if you don't have that to identify an area that says, hey, has high potential.
Right. In fact, we did a show specifically on finding shell beds.
Yep. It was
One of
one of
our
the best
past
shows
shows.
ever.
Yeah. So okay, so that's the post spawn, right? So now what's happening is now they're going to start to move out to the summer pattern. Understand this.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, the bigger females spawn first. The bigger females are the first to leave. All right. Once they're done spawning, there's a weight loss that goes into play because they just released a ton of eggs. They're going to be big long bass, but they're not going to be big bodied at this point in time. They're going to look really long, like you're going to have the mouths of 7 and 8 pounders, and they're going to have the bodies of 6 pounders.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how it goes. But once summer comes around, they start to get out there and they start gorging. And this is the time of year, probably the best time other than the spawn or pre-spawn. The best time is summer through winter for to catch really big ones. And it's just that I focus most of the time for big fish summer all the way through the winter time.
Now, let me ask you this, Frank. In the summertime, those big fish go out. Is that when you're more likely to look for a combination of structure and cover to where you're fishing the cover that is on the structure in that summertime?
Yeah, because everybody knows it as the spot on the spot or the sweet spot. The sweet spot it could be pure
A unique structural element within a structural element.
correct. So
Okay.
So here, the sweet spot could be, let's just say you got a hard bottom area, it's rocky, it's gravelly, and you graph it and graph it and graph it, or at least I do. And then I'll find one spot on that element where it just has a little vertical break on it. That little vertical break will be the holding place probably for the best bass in the group, because the biggest bass is going to take the best, most optimal area for survival, for food, for cover, for everything. The biggest bass is going to take that spot. So I'm always looking for the different. What is
Okay.
the different thing on that? Or it could be, if you guys fish football jigs and or Carolina rigs, you're dragging it, and it's going doom, 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 doom. All of a sudden it starts to get real snaggy where the jig or the Carolina rig is hanging up. That's where you're getting the bite, because your boulders just changed. You went from, baseball size, golf ball size rock. Now you're into basketball size stuff, or there's a little rise in that area.
So let me ask you this, because we're talking about big bass.
Correct.
So what I've gotten on this, where you said where they spawn first, they come out and they're going to be on the primary. Well, most guys, if you're out there like early summer, or a different time of year, it sounds like you're not afraid to fish a spot that might have a school of smaller fish on it during the prime summertime, but that same spot could hold one or two giant fish before everyone thinks that they get out there, because that fish has done its thing 5 to 8 degrees colder than anyone else. They typically know where to spawn where they don't get messed with, and then they're out there. So you're not out there cracking on them. You're out there looking for 1 or 2 bites while everyone else is still up on the bank.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to get a big bite.
Oh, it's fabulous.
Okay.
Like there's times when I'm out and guys are beating the bank to death, and I know that I can go shallow and catch tons of fish, but I'm not going shallow because I'm looking for a better quality. Like there's a lake here, an inland lake here. Everybody was on the bank, and I was fishing with my youngest son, Josh. Everybody was on the bank, and man, I knew the bite was going off. And it took every ounce of energy I had not to go there because I know we had an early spawn that year. And so our spawns, depending on our winter time, our spawns are either drawn out or short and tight. So if we lock in, we freeze up, the lakes are all iced over, we have a big winter, our spring spawn is, it's a tight window and they're all doing it. If we have a milder winter, our spawn is graduated. It gets a little bit longer. There's bass that go early. There's bass that go, majority of the bass will go within the same week or two. And then you'll have some late spawners. So I knew that we had an early spawn go on because of the mild winter we had. So I told Josh, we're going to go out. We're going offshore and we're going to stay there. And traditionally, this lake, to win it, 9 to 12 pounds. Traditionally, we had close to 20 pounds, and we crashed them. And not a single soul was offshore in this place. So you got to pay attention to this kind of stuff, because this gives you percentage for better quality.
That makes so much sense. So, I just did that Master Angler Challenge with Matt Steffen, and this makes sense totally. So we went to a bunch of different lakes in the area that I knew had quality big fish in it. And I was talking to my buddy Austin and Scott Palmer from the Bass Tank and stuff, and they're like, dude, we just had a ton of water. It had gotten dirty. It had gotten up a lot of water willow around some of these lakes, and like they're up shallow, like they moved up with it, right?
Right.
And I was like, okay, but both Matt Steffen and I agreed our goal was to catch a 24-inch largemouth or a 10-pounder. The odds of catching one of those giants that had flooded up into that shallow when the water came up and Matt talked about this, it didn't make sense. We weren't targeting 4 and 5 pounders. We were looking for 1 or 2 fish. So we stayed on channel swings, which is I'm pulling this together, which is structure.
Yes.
In 14 to 18 feet. And then we targeted stumps that were on those channel swings, which was a cover element that would position them instead of, the channel swings hundreds of yards by the time it swings. And then we were looking for gizzard shad or sunfish that were around and loosely related to this cover that was on the structure.
Sounds perfect.
And we found this 4 or 5 times over 3 or 4 different lakes. And I've caught big fish on these spots historically. I mean, it's gorgeous. You see it, you're in 25, you pan up and it's 14 and boom, there's the stump, and you put your bait down there, a jig, a big piece of plastic, something like that. And, you see that fish owns that stump and he's there ambushing 6 to 8 inch gizzard shad or 7-inch crappie. And we had one come out and look at it. But even though we never boated a fish, it was a horrible day. We got in the truck and we both agreed that we put ourselves in position to catch a big fish than if we had gone and caught 15, 2 to possibly up to 5 pounders on the bank, because that's where the majority of the fish were then.
Right.
Based on what you just said, we wanted to stay out.
Yeah, I think that was a smart play because, and here, remember what you said earlier, Krupe spent 15 days chasing one or 12 days chasing one.
Dude, I found some cool stuff.
So you theoretically could have went out when conditions were better and went back there and caught it.
Yeah. Look at this. So this is Lake Castaic in the 80s. In the 80s, there's the marker buoy, which means he's on structure out of the middle of nowhere. This is way before. This is the 1980s. This is way before this stuff went down. And all these guys are like, how the hell do you do this? Like, what? What are you doing out here? And look, they're just like, look at them holding the line with their fingers. I'm pretty sure that's Bob
CH100, the reel.
Yeah, I think that's Bob Croupy, isn't it, on the back there?
Yeah, I believe so.
Full sit down, talking. Oh yeah, that's not a man that looks like he could catch a big bass. I don't know what is. But at the end, there's the ad. They end up catching, a 8 or 9 pounder, but the whole show they don't catch that many fish. Like they hardly don't catch any fish at all.
No, because they're completely searching for a big one.
Yep.
I mean, that's just how it goes.
Very cool.
That's so funny, man.
Yeah, let's see if we get the hook set on that.
Yeah.
There it is. To paint a picture, I mean, Croupy's in the 80s. He's got a high, tall trucker hat, G. Loomis. He's got a gnarly pair of aviator sunglasses on, a thick black mustache, and he just brought up a slob from the depths.
He looks like Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec.
Exactly. All right, so like you mentioned before, the big change in this, Frank, is right now. Right now, where there's a lot of fish, we're seeing it go down on Gunnersville. We're seeing it go down on Rayburn, Toledo Bend, all this, which is the high percentage of roaming fish on the fishery that guys are able to now be like, my God, that's a big one that's like confusingly on nothing.
Correct.
I don't know how much experience have you gotten out yet, or are you still have you gotten out yet
last December? Yeah.
And seen that phenomenon and spent a ton of time on the water trying to figure out how to target the big ones this time of the year when they appear to be random. And now this is a forward facing sonar portion of day 4.
Yeah, I have. As you all know, this is a new game for me. So last year was the first year where I really specifically started really bass fishing off of it. It's been paying huge dividends for me. So last year I was on a lake where traditionally you'll catch a lot of 2-pounders and maybe some mid-range 3s. If you catch a big one, it'll be 1 or 2, and it's usually in the 4-pound category on this particular lake I was on. So I was out there in December, and I wound up catching 5 giants that were, one of them was the biggest fish I got out there was 5'8", and I had 4 in the 4-pound category in one day, and I caught. It was funny because I actually caught the bigger ones on a jig and minnow, and I caught a lot of the other ones on a jerkbait, the smaller ones on a jerkbait. And so that was really my first real, like, holy crap, I think that's a bass. You know what I mean? And I throw out there and I'm shaking the thing and it swims over to it. And I got him and I'm like, oh my God, that's a good one. You know what I mean? That was really my first go around with it. This winter, I started experimenting again with it, and I did get into a situation where I wound up leaving the lake with over a 20-pound limit, and I only caught about 15 fish, but they were all giants, and didn't see a single one of them on live scope. But what I saw was the sweet spot on the structure, and I would throw my A-rig over top of it and slow roll it over the top of it, and then the fish would come out for it. And here's the irony of this. They wouldn't touch a jig, and they wouldn't touch a Ned rig, and they wouldn't touch a jig. But as soon as I put the A-rig over it, I would catch one. And here's the crazy thing. It was 1 bass per pile. And so I just kept going. These long fingering points would come out, and I kept going on the inside swings of them all. And they were on the inside turns of all these long points. And I could only catch one off of each cover element on the end of this structure. I could only catch one off of it. And I never saw one until they came out for the thing. I shook a minnow over them. They wouldn't look at it, but for some reason that flash mob, they came out for the flash mob. Now, if this was before I had forward facing or before forward facing, you would assume there was no fish there. But because I could see them react, then I knew the fish was there. That was the coolest thing to me ever, because I'm like, it would have taken me a painful long time to fish every square inch of these fingers that I was on. It would have taken me a painfully long time, but because I could see it, I could launch it out there, roll it by. If nothing reacted to it, I just kept moving on. Now I was fishing meticulously slow,
right?
But I was covering massive amounts of water to do it.
Yep.
It was
and
really
that's another
cool.
point I think that is key to make, is even in really cold water, these big fish, and they're not warm-blooded, Frank. They're remarkably active.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Hey, what's up?
Little Bama.
Is that's Bama?
Yeah, Bama.
Ask if she's excited that she's probably going to slide into the last spot of the playoffs.
You're in, baby. But yeah, so here's the funny thing about cold water bass, okay? The only thing I noticed up north about the differences in these bass, okay, is they won't jump. When the water temperature gets to be about 38, 39 degrees, they will not jump. They'll pull, they'll fight, they'll run, but they will not jump. Their metabolism slows down. You with the naked eye can't even tell the difference that the fish is any slower, because theoretically they're not. Okay, they still have to run something down to eat it. They're not. When their metabolism slows, all that means is their digestive system is slowing down, so they don't require the amount. They don't have to eat as much as they do in the warm months. In the warm months, they got to continuously eat. In the cold months, which is another key. Now we're going to go back to bait size. Okay. In the cold months, a bigger bait will get a bigger bite, because they don't have to eat that much. If they eat a big bait fish, they don't have to expend more energy to try to catch a bunch of little ones. So that's what it means when their metabolism slows. It takes them longer to digest. You know what I mean? They don't require the feeding frequencies. The reason you catch so many in the cold months is because they group together more. There's more bass. When you find them, there's more bass in one area. That's why.
I feel like it's intimidating for a lot of people who have the forward-facing technology to go out and go, whoa, I'm in an ocean. I'm trying to find something that's 25 inches long. I've tried to reinvent my tournament fishing and my fishing over the last 2 years, just kind of seeing where things are going, in my opinion, with it. And I think you can break it down way more simplistic. So even if you haven't had success with it, or it is intimidating, you can say, hey, this is kind of some areas. The first thing and I want your opinion on this, when it gets cold and I'm on a body of water that I've not been to, my first thing is I want to look at the dam, because that'll typically be the clearest water in the lake. From what you have, that dam will be the clearest, deepest, cleanest water in the lake, based on what I've learned on day 4, right?
100%.
So I'm going to go down the face of the dam, and I'm going to serpentine from a couple hundred yards out to right on the dam. That's going to show where the cover, which if it's man-made and it's would riprap be considered cover or structure, Frank?
I'm going to call it cover, but it could be both.
Okay. But that's where you're going to see where it ends. You're going to see where the bait fish are. Are they rock related? Are they bottom related? Are they off? Then I'm going to work my way towards the first vertical, and where the first vertical and horizontal structure meets closest to the dam. And that's going to tell me how they're relating to the structure, where they're relating on it, and what level of the water column they're in.
100% correct.
Does this sound right?
Yes, because you could literally idle off the boat ramp and the first ball of bait
Yep.
you find.
If I'm on a lake that I can put in by the dam that I've never been on, that's what I'm doing when it's cold.
Yeah. 100%.
That doesn't mean I'm going to catch them there, but it's going to give me the information. And
Right.
we've talked about information and decision making, and so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the most defined channel on the lake, and you just talked about this. And I'm going to start a couple hundred yards before the channel. I'm going to work across the channel, because for some reason what we found, and this is why sometimes they're really hard to catch, they like to suspend in the middle of the channel. And I think it has something to do with where the bait fish is. Sometimes they like to suspend off it. I think it's easier for them to chase bait off of that. But I'm going to see where a fish is related to in the channel. Now, I'm not talking like a channel where it's like 100 feet deep and then 150 feet deep and then 100. But, like if you got 15 on either side or 20 on either side, and then it drops down into 35 or 40 in it, enough. I don't know what it is, but sometimes that makes a difference. Now I've checked 2 of the major things where I'm trying to find these big floaters in the wintertime. Agree with all that,
Correct.
Frank?
Yeah, I do, because for simplicity's sake, we'll do a cross shot here, just simplicity's sake. Okay. So this will be the channel.
Mm-hmm.
And then these will be the.
And this is it applies to grass lakes. I don't fish grass lakes much. I know it's totally different on grass lakes. This is primarily non-grass
You're right.
man-made
This is
fisheries.
structure lake. So if this is the deep channel,
yep,
most of your fish, you'll see them suspending in this zone.
Yep.
But what happens is a lot of times they'll relate to the edge, okay, and suspend up from the edges. That's
Beautiful.
why what you said, you go back and forth on.
And that changes day to day. I think that has something to do with sunlight, water temperature, and bait fish location.
Yeah, and wind current.
So then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, in the winter, I'm going to look for the most obvious, and you talked about this with Croupy, long tapering point that goes out into the lake. And when on my map, and when I drive up to it, I'm going to start 500 yards short of it. I'm going to be and I'm going to start heading towards it. So I might be in, if you're on Table Rock or you're doing that, you're going to be in 100 feet of water.
Yeah, you are.
But what you're going to do is you are going to get a picture of where the bait is. There's going to be something around that point this time of the year of where the bait is, the depth that it's in, the height. And then as you go up, you literally just go until you keep going, even if you catch a couple, because there might be a whole nother wave of fish that's up shallower or out deeper. But if you start where, like, if you have a team partner and you pull up to fish a dock, you're like, why the hell are you stopping out here? Like, let's get up to the dock. You ever had that team partner that stops short and you're like, get that oar out. You're trying to get them up there so you can make a cast. Start way out off there and then just work your way up looking. And those are the first 3 things I do on a fishery that I've never been to. If I'm looking for suspended fish on forward facing sonar.
Yeah, but see, that's perfect because it's very systematic. You eliminate water in a very chronological way, and then you pick up on the clues. So if you're doing it and you say, oh my gosh, they're 30 yards, towards the main river channel, but even with the first break. So then you could go, even in deep gut pockets, you can go to a pocket with a deep gut and you go probably 30 yards, they're going to be to that break.
Mm-hmm.
And so it helps you eliminate, it makes it really manageable really rapidly.
And now on lakes with timber, a lot of the most successful pros in the world, you fish against Todd Faircloth. Todd Faircloth is a badass, Frank.
Yeah.
And I was asking him one time about Rayburn or Toledo, because that thing is, and he goes, I just pretend like the timber's not there.
Yeah, that's exactly.
And he's like,
right.
Yeah, they'll be on the timber in those areas. And we've talked about this on day 4 before. He's like, but if you put in there, that's intimidating. If you use the system that you just talked about in the areas you just talked about, that'll put you on the areas where those fish will be, where then they will be relating to the timber there. Correct. But you're not literally just going through a forest hoping to see a deer. You're in the riverbed where those things are traveling. You're at the freaking feeder.
Correct. That's funny. You even mentioned Toledo Bend, because Toledo Bend, the first time I ever fished on Toledo Bend, I was like, "Oh my gosh, you can't leave the
Oh, look at my tournament results. It's horrible.
yeah,
Dude, I've been so intimidated every time I've been there.
you can't leave there's so much standing timber, you can't leave the boat lanes." And so I said, "Okay, um, no, I'm not even going to pay attention to the standing timber." And I went structure fishing, and the one of my best places I found where two creek channels intersected each other
Mm-hmm.
and made that little bump in the middle of the intersection, and there was wood on it because everywhere was
Yep.
wood. There was wood on it, but the bass were right on the split. And I was like, "Holy crap." And I found like 7 more places exactly like it on a lake that has so much wood on it. If you drained it, you would be standing in the middle of a forest.
Yeah, it's
Um,
intimidating as hell.
yeah,
And I haven't figured this out, but in that last open, what I did figure out, you've seen Cody Huff catch him there in the boat lane, and you've seen guys that I mean, there you'd run past it in the open, and there'd be guys like fishing in the boat. Well, what you what I've come to realize is they're fishing the structural element
yeah,
that they just happened to cut the boat lane through. So
correct.
they can fish a crankbait, they could drag a bait, they could do all that. Those fish aren't there because they're living in the boat lane. Those fish are there because the boat lane goes over what they want to live on.
Correct. 100%.
And it's just easier
100%.
to fish.
Yeah, it's no different Amistad, when I was deep cranking the standing trees. It was no different.
Mm-hmm.
The trees that had the fish on them were the ones that went way out on the long points. And then where the group of trees was on the end of the point before it broke down is the groups of trees where the bass were on.
Yeah.
You could fish the whole underwater creek channel all the way up to the bank and never catch one, but as soon as you got out to the end of the point where the trees were, you'd start catching
Mm-hmm.
them again. And so that was, that's and so here the big thing for big bass is pay attention, because if you catch one, it's telling you something, and you have to understand what it's telling you. Um, you know, like when I turned around and went back to where I caught the one and found the difference in the vegetation, if I didn't go back to there, I would have never recognized that. I might have caught a couple more if I fished enough grass and accidentally, you know, threw into the right place.
Mm-hmm.
But because I went back to it and saw exactly what it was, I could literally just cruise and spot them. And it turned a day that could have been marginal into an exceptional day. And so that's, you just got to pay attention.
And like I said, when you're paying attention, I think you're a perfect example of someone who's embraced the technology without using it to change your fishing experience, Frank.
Yeah,
And we had Joe on who was talking about, I love it and things like that. And the cool thing is when you're learning any new technique, which I'm just going to say forward facing technique,
it
even
is.
though it's not, but I mean, you know what I mean? It's a style of fishing, just like anything. Like if you're just getting into it, let's say you have the graph and you're doing it. I think we have a lot of listeners that kind of have it, not sure. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's a lot of
yeah,
that demographic of guys who have it, not sure what it is going to take time. Like I can't think of very many days where I've gone out and just gone big one, big one, big one. Like you have to think of it as hunting, as searching, as
yeah.
learning. And then when you see it, you're going to cast a gar, you're going to cast a drum, you're
Oh
going to
yeah,
cast to buffalo, you're going to cast to balls of bait fish that look like bass, and then you're going to cast to bass. That's awesome. You're not wasting your time when you're out there in the middle. You could go days and days and days using your forward facing sonar, especially in the winter, not catching anything. And you have to look at it as what you're learning.
oh
You're
yeah,
learning what the species look like. You're learning where those species are. You're learning, hey, everything that's in this depth range, I think is a buffalo. And then you'll catch a bass and you'll be like, okay, all these fish, you can see a forked tail when they're swimming away. Guess what? That's not a bass.
correct.
And so you're not wasting your time out there this time of year, especially if you're looking for a bigger one. You're learning, and you're all about learning, Frank. And it's cool. You'll
Yeah,
call me up and you'll be like, oh, this. And
I know,
that's
I
you.
know.
And that's you to where you spent the first 20 years of your career, you know, when you start fishing, you're learning in big chunks, and that's what exciting, and that's why people go all in on it. And then you kind of reach it to where you start learning in smaller chunks, and it's not as exciting, but then you become an expert in it. And now you're adding little bits and pieces,
Correct.
and you're refining the process so that that aha moment. I think that's why when new baits come out that catch fish, people go nuts because they're like, here's something crazy and new that we haven't seen.
Right, like
But
the
it's
chatterbait.
but it's cool to see with that forward facing sonar, you're learning in big chunks again after you spent 3 decades as an expert in a field and you didn't think there was any quantum leaps to be made. It was just refining in small steps. Here you are just taking massive chunks and going, dude, it's just like you're getting back into the sport for the first time.
So here's the learning curve. In the beginning, you don't know a lot. So you're learning a lot fast. So you're spiking, you're going way up. Then you reach a point where you got your casting techniques down, you got your 4 seasonal patterns down, and all of a sudden you start to flatten out again. Then the bell goes off and you learn something new and it goes up again. Well, the more you start to know, then your steps get shorter together. You know what I mean? That's the learning curve in fishing.
And if you're not having, this is important. If you're not having fun, like if you're going out there and go, just stare at a graph and date, go do it for 30, 35 minutes. And when it comes to in your brain that it's not fun, go to a place you've jacked them on a jig before, cast the thing out and drag it across the bottom. Go to a brush pile where you know it is and throw a jerk bait over it. Then go, I wonder, if this would be a good place to go look at, and then go do it. You don't have to go 18 hours straight the whole day looking at the thing. Mix it up, learn a little bit each time you go, and enjoy the process and enjoy the learning curve.
Yeah, see, I love it because it was new to me. I'm not great at it yet, but I don't suck at it now. Um, and I have to be honest with you, Matt. You know, the first practically the first year I had it, all I did was crappie fish off of it
Mm-hmm.
because I needed to get so good at what am I looking at? And I can tell the difference now between if I see a school of perch, if I see a school of crappie, bluegill, I can tell the difference between those. And now the bass, I could say, oh yeah, that's a bass. But it's funny because I threw at a bunch of gar and caught them. I caught some of them. I'm like, oh my god,
Stripers, white bass.
oh yeah, dude, hybrids. I'm like, oh, that's a big one. Throw out there, and all of a sudden, boom, and
catfish.
pike, muskies.
Dude, you'll catch a ton of catfish.
Oh yeah, dude.
Catfish are aggressive, live bait eating, school chasing fish. They're not, they'll eat a chunk of liver on the bottom, but my God,
dude,
we had no clue how aggressive they were.
The amount of catfish I catch crankbait fishing is ludicrous. Like, I'm like, why don't these catfish hunters just throw big crankbaits? You know what I mean? Because I catch so many of them. It's like, oh my God.
What they used to say about the muskie tournaments.
Oh, yeah.
The guys in the muskie tournaments catch 6-pound smallies on freaking big chopper baits on top, and then we're catching the guys in the bass tournaments are catching the muskie on drop shots and little 3-inch swim baits.
100%. It's the way it goes, man.
I didn't mean to take it over there, Frank. I just thought that was some important stuff when we were talking about it that has really helped me in the process.
No, it has to be said because you're right. I mean, I'll call you up. Oh my God, blah blah blah, and you're like, yeah, I know.
But then I'm also calling other guys up too.
Yeah.
And I'm going, and they're, I'm like, oh, that never even occurred to me.
Right.
And they're like, well, that's basic. And I'm like, well, that's why you're top 10 and 5 in a row is because you have a deeper skill set and understanding where I'm not putting the pieces of the puzzle together and all of it. And you go boom, 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 boom. Here's where I need to go, how to look. Yeah, it definitely helps you catch it. But the thing is, all of the knowledge on day 4 puts you in that position to catch them.
Yeah, 100%. The cool thing, what I like about day 4 is I talk about my own experiences. And so it's 100% accurate. You know what I mean? Like I can tell you I've done this and this worked, this didn't work. This is the best way I think to do this. With the live scope game, I'm 2 years in now, or 3. Am I 2 in? 2? 3,
You're like 2.5.
2.5 in. I feel pretty comfortable with it, to be
Yeah,
honest
I
with
feel
you.
like you're really a year in.
Yeah, I'll say a year.
You're a year where I feel like you are comfortable enough with it to start. You're expanding. You're seeing it.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because now I'm like going
I mean,
down, and I go like this. I go, oh my god,
uh,
I'm fishing the bank, okay, and I'm scoping, fishing the bank, scoping, fishing the bank.
yeah.
I go, oh my god, I think that's a bass. I grab my jerk bait, beep, 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 got him.
Yeah.
It's a bass. You know
I
what I
say
mean?
that because the first year I got a lot of phone calls. I think my shit's broken. I
Yeah,
think my transducer doesn't work.
yeah.
But
It's
it's not.
when you're dialed, when you get everything dialed in, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Hey,
It's pretty cool.
so like I said, I'm in Mexico right now. So this show airs on December
12.
12th. We'll be back live Thursday, December 19th. I got it. I got an idea. I want you right now, from when we're recording this, we're not down there. Write down pounds and ounces, and when we convert it, my biggest bass of the 5-day trip in El Salto. And if you guess it, I mean, we'll have it on camera there. Can we send do you think we could send a lucky viewer on that show on the 19th in the comments section like a bait?
Yeah,
If we guess it exactly, like if you say
yeah,
whatever, 3
yeah.
pounds 11 ounces, and I come back and I'm like, Frank, you're not going to believe this.
Now, but I got to do your biggest, right?
Yeah, biggest. So right now, you write it. We'll write it down right now, and then when we come back on the 19th, if you guess pounds and ounces, Pradco prize pack for someone that's
Do I have
watching
to,
that live show.
when I do my ounces? Do I have to be like 892, 3 digits?
No. Just give me pounds and ounces, and then we'll convert the hundred. If it's a hundreds, we'll convert it to ounces. That gives you a 1 in 16 chance instead of hundreds, with a better chance for our listeners. And I would let people guess in the comment section, but the problem is I know I'm going to be posting there because they have Starlink. We're going to be doing live shows in the evening from El Salto, from Pro Bass Adventures. And I mean, if you watch it on Thursday, then you know what my biggest bass would be up until Thursday. So that's why I want to do it.
Okay, I wrote it down.
Do you want to tell me, or do you want me to? Do we want to keep it a mystery on both ends? I don't want to know what you wrote down.
No, you're not going to know.
Yeah, don't tell me what you wrote down.
You're not going to know. So just for the record, just so everybody knows, I scribbled something out.
Okay.
And the weight is under my thumb.
Put that off to the side, and in 2 weeks we'll open it up and I'll unveil what my big bass was, and then you can unveil what you wrote down, and if they match up.
So I folded it up, and I'm going to put it right up here on the lamp. Okay, there it is.
And then also by the 16th, we should have a better understanding of what the Bassmaster Classic schedule is going to look like in Fort Worth. You are coming to that in March, right, Frank?
Yeah, we have to iron this down.
Yeah, and we will also by that time have a date for when show number 200 is.
Yes,
we're less than 15 away now, Frank.
We got to get busy, man.
Yeah,
we got a lot to do in a short amount of time.
We will also, the drop was today, so go check that out. I'm not cleaning house. That's not it. Housekeeping. No. Cleaning house would be like, right. We're done, Frank. Have a nice life.
Yeah, exactly. That's called breaking free.
That would be cleaning house. That's this is housekeeping.
So St. Clair Red breaks today.
Yep. And then also after the holidays, before that, we will have a limited run, 100 only, because we had to purchase it. Frank Scalish patch adjustable high quality hats with I'm not sure whether it's the largemouth or the smallmouth, but the fish that's on the back of the shirt you got on right now, Frank.
This is the largemouth shirt.
Yeah. And it's the smallmouth is the hat, but it's that design with the Frank Scalish signature on a patch that is then on the Richardson 112. Only 100 of them, which means there's only 90 of them because I'm going to get a couple. I'm sure Frankie's going to want one. And yeah, the man has to have his own hat. So
yeah, I have to.
That'll be live till it's sold out, as well as 100 BTL hats with the new rubber round logo in it. BTL logo.
Sweet.
We're moving and shaking, Frank.
We're doing stuff.
Anything else? You got any other announcements?
No, but I might have an announcement when we go live on the 19th.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you gonna get the fish before then? I want to that's what your biggest gap would be between now and then.
Just
You socked in.
we lost your audio. You got to start that over.
Are you socked in, or are you gonna get to fish it all between now and the 19th?
We have a lot of snow right now, but yeah, I'm planning on fishing starting.
Crappie or bass?
Bass, both bass mostly. I
want to guess your biggest bass between now and the 19th, and if I get it right, we'll do the same thing.
Okay.
The safest bet with the weather up there would probably be 0.0, but
it could be. I mean, it could be, but you just make and understand something. You know I'm not down south,
right?
So you gotta and I'll have a digital scale, so I'll take a picture of it of the weight on the scale.
Okay.
It's
weird, isn't it? You want to know what I wrote, don't
you? I do so bad, but you know what's crazy?
know I'm the same way with the El Salto fish. I think you drastically overestimated El Salto.
Oh no, I did not.
It's real hard to hit double digits at El Salto. They got a place at Baccarat that's probably the double digit, but someone in our group will most likely catch one that is double digit. But I've also talked to you a bunch about that, so maybe you went more realistic instead of moonshot.
I took a gamble on the high side of not getting over the top.
Okay. And I think I took a very realistic gamble that's not insulting to you, but also not out of reach. Like it's a wheelhouse number. Like if you go out, I think there's a very good chance that you will catch a largemouth that is within 6 ounces of my guess.
Yeah.
One way or the other.
Yeah. And it could be. I mean, it could be.
Don't forget to weigh it.
I won't. I have to get extra batteries because my scale's been in the boat. It's been in the teens. It's been in the teens here, man.
All right. I'm going to go look at Christmas lights tonight and then go ice skating.
Perfect.
With Courtney, not by myself.
That was kind of unwritten, Matt. We kind of knew that.
All right, this has been another edition of Day 4 with the man Frank Scalish. We will be back live 8:30 a.m. Central Time. Bass Talk Live on December 19th. I guess that'll be our Christmas show because that'll be our last show before Christmas.
Holy smokes. That's right. December 19th. Feliz Navidad.
October, November, and December literally just flew by.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but the whole summer flew by. I mean, this whole season went like...
It did. Can you still hear me now that I brought the music in?
Si, senor.
All right, we'll talk to everybody next week. See ya.